Elena stood near the wide glass window, watching the snow fall in thick, furious sheets that almost erased the world outside. The weather forecast had warned of one of the worst storms in a decade, and now she could feel every bit of its force shaking the mansion. At 37 weeks pregnant, every instinct in her body screamed that something was off. Her breaths were shallow, her heart uneasy, and a strange heaviness settled low in her stomach. She turned to Marcus, who was adjusting his coat in the mirror with an expression that showed he cared more about his appearance than the dangerous storm forming around them. She pleaded with him to stay, telling him she didn't feel right and that the storm could trap them inside. But Marcus didn't even pretend to consider it. He rolled his eyes, accusing her of being dramatic and overthinking everything because of hormones. He reminded her that Camilla's party was important, using that cold tone he saved only for her. Without hesitation, he ordered the staff to leave early for safety, all while ignoring the fact that their absence would leave Elena completely alone. As the last vehicle left the property and disappeared behind swirling snow, Elena's sense of dread deepened. She followed Marcus to the foyer, her voice trembling as she begged him one last time not to go. Instead of reassurance, she received a dismissive wave and a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he finally walked out the door, icy wind rushed inside, sending a chill straight through her bones. Thunder rumbled overhead, rattling the windows as if warning her of what was about to unfold. The roads outside were already being swallowed by snow, visibility dropping with every passing minute. Elena placed a protective hand over her belly, whispering to her baby, trying to steady her nerves. But deep down she knew the truth: the storm wasn't the only danger tonight. She was completely alone, and something terrible was coming. Marcus had always been good at lying, and tonight he slipped into the role with effortless ease. He stood in front of Elena with a fake expression of concern, claiming he had an urgent business event he couldn't possibly miss, even though his eyes sparkled with excitement rather than obligation. The moment he stepped out of her sight, his entire demeanor changed. He pulled out his phone and immediately texted Camilla, sending her pictures of his suit options and asking which one she thought made him look powerful enough for her crowd. Camilla responded instantly, showering him with flirtatious emojis and reminding him that her friends were expecting him early. She wanted to show him off, to flaunt the married millionaire who chose her over his wife. Her messages were filled with subtle pressure, making it clear she valued his presence more than anything happening in his real life. Marcus, eager to please her, promised he was on his way and even joked about how he had handled his clingy wife problems. Camilla replied with a laughing voice note, telling him to hurry because the photographers had already arrived. Inside the mansion, Elena watched Marcus from a distance, noticing the stiffness in his shoulders and the coldness in his tone. He wasn't even trying to hide his irritation anymore. Every word he spoke felt shallow, rehearsed, and distant. She placed a hand over her belly, trying to calm the uneasy twisting inside her. She told herself not to argue, not to stress the baby, even though her heart felt heavy with fear. The storm outside roared louder, almost as if mirroring her instincts. When Marcus finally grabbed his keys and walked toward the door, she felt a sudden, chilling certainty run through her. Something terrible was going to happen tonight, and no matter how much she hoped otherwise, she sensed that he would not be there when she needed him most. The storm grew harsher by the minute, slamming against the windows with a force that made Elena flinch every time the wind howled. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to fight off the growing sense of dread when a sudden, sharp pain shot across her lower back. It forced her to stop mid-step, gripping the edge of a table for support. At first, she tried to convince herself it was just fatigue or maybe Braxton Hicks, but then the pain returned, stronger, deeper, unmistakably real. Her breathing hitched as she reached for her phone, dialing Marcus immediately. The call rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again, but each attempt ended the same way. A cold realization washed over her: he had turned off his phone. She moved toward the window, hoping to catch sight of someone, anyone, outside, but the entire driveway had vanished beneath a white, swirling blanket of snow. The world beyond the glass looked like a frozen void. No lights. No passing cars. No hope of anyone reaching her in this weather. Her heart pounded as she shuffled toward the landline, praying it would work even if the cell network didn't. When she picked it up, all she heard was loud static crackling in her ear. She tapped it, shook it, even tried unplugging and reconnecting it, but the storm had already taken the power lines hostage. Her breathing grew shallow as another contraction tightened around her abdomen, forcing her to bend forward and grip her belly. It wasn't random pain anymore. It had a rhythm, slow, steady, and unmistakably familiar. She began pacing the living room, her breaths coming in short gasps as she tried to remember the calming techniques from her prenatal classes. But nothing helped the fear rising in her chest. She could feel her body preparing, step by step, for labor. And in that terrifying moment, she understood the truth she had been trying to avoid: her baby might be coming tonight, and she was completely, utterly alone in a mansion being swallowed by a deadly storm. Another contraction hit Elena with a force so sharp it stole the air from her lungs. She clutched her stomach and tried to steady herself, but before she could take another breath, a warm gush of fluid spilled down her legs and splattered across the cold marble floor. For a moment she froze, staring down in shock as the reality slammed into her: her water had broken. Panic surged through her. Her knees buckled, and she let out a loud, desperate scream for help, her voice echoing off the mansion walls. But the house was empty. No staff, no neighbors, no husband. Only the violent storm outside answered her with another roar of thunder. Shaking, she reached for her phone with trembling hands and dialed Marcus again. Her thumb kept slipping from the screen, her vision blurring as pain pulsed through her body in deep, relentless waves. The call connected, and for a second hope flickered inside her, until he rejected it. She tried again. Declined. Again. Declined. Each rejection felt like another blow, another reminder that he had chosen someone else over her at the most vulnerable moment of her life. Meanwhile, the party was alive with flashing lights, thumping bass, and laughter spilling from every room. Marcus stood near the bar, a drink in hand, surrounded by guests who praised him for showing up despite the storm. When his phone buzzed repeatedly, Camilla noticed the screen light up with Elena's name. She snatched the phone from his hand with a mocking smirk and said, "She's so needy, don't let her ruin the night." Marcus gave a small shrug, barely hiding his annoyance. Camilla pressed the power button and turned off the phone completely before slipping it into her purse. Around them, people danced, posed for photos, and enjoyed the glamorous night, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that Marcus's wife was at home, alone, terrified, and on the verge of giving birth. The music drowned out everything, but the contrast couldn't have been more brutal: Elena fighting for strength on a cold floor, and Marcus celebrating under glittering lights, oblivious to the life he was abandoning. Camilla's winter party turned into a social media frenzy within minutes of starting. Influencers strutted through the mansion in glittering gowns, filming every corner for their followers. Ring lights, camera flashes, and live streams filled the air as people posed dramatically beside ice sculptures, crystal chandeliers, and a massive champagne tower that sparkled beneath the decorative lights. A well-known vlogger announced to her audience that this was the party of the season, while another influencer panned her camera across the ballroom just as fireworks exploded outside, bathing the night in shimmering colors. It was the kind of event meant to go viral, and it did. Marcus fit right into the chaos. With a drink in one hand and a seductive smirk on his face, he danced with Camilla as if he were a single man enjoying his freedom. Cameras caught him laughing loudly, whispering into Camilla's ear, even spinning her around on the dance floor. Every clip posted online painted him as a carefree, wealthy bachelor living the high life. Whenever someone mentioned his wife, most assumed she was safe in their warm mansion, likely resting or enjoying a quiet night. A few guests whispered that she was too fragile to socialize, while others joked that Marcus must be relieved to escape her constant pregnancy moods. Meanwhile, miles away, Elena lay alone in agony, still fighting through contractions. But the truth began slipping out when one of Elena's close friends, Sarah, casually opened her phone while taking shelter from the storm at her apartment. A trending livestream caught her eye. She clicked it, and froze when she saw Marcus dancing with Camilla, holding her by the waist as if no one else existed. Her shock deepened when she remembered Elena's message earlier that day: "I don't feel well." Something feels off. Sarah's chest tightened. She stared at the screen, horrified. Something was very, very wrong, and Elena might be in danger. Pain tore through Elena's body in relentless waves, each contraction sharper and more demanding than the last. She forced herself onto the cold marble floor, using her arms to crawl toward the garage, every movement agonizing. Her cries echoed off the empty walls, a mixture of fear and desperation, but there was no one to hear her. Each time she slipped on the slick, icy floor, the sharp edges of pain and panic intertwined, making her feel more isolated than ever. Her legs trembled uncontrollably, and she scraped her knees and hands as she pushed herself forward, sweat and tears mixing on her face. Finally, she reached the garage door, dragging herself upright despite the burning in her muscles. She fumbled with the keys and forced the door open, shivering violently as the cold gusts of winter slammed against her face. She climbed into the car, hoping it would provide some protection from the storm, but as she turned the key, the engine refused to roar to life. The frigid air had made the battery sluggish, the fuel line frozen. Panic set in deeper than before. Her hands shook so violently she could barely grip the steering wheel, and her vision blurred from the combination of cold, stress, and pain. As she doubled over with another contraction, she noticed a faint trickle of blood. Her heart lurched in terror. She had read enough to know this was dangerous. Her breaths came in quick, uneven gasps as she whispered desperate prayers, clutching her belly and begging silently for her baby's safety. The icy wind from the half-open door cut into her skin, intensifying her vulnerability. Every second felt excruciatingly long, and with each passing moment, the snowstorm outside seemed more suffocating, more insurmountable. Alone, frightened, and in pain, Elena realized the peril of her situation. She might lose the baby if help didn't arrive soon, and Marcus, the one person who should have been there, was nowhere to be found. The wind howled like a living thing, shaking the trees and sending drifts of snow slamming against the mansion walls. Outside, Daniel struggled to maneuver his snowplow through the relentless storm, his vehicle crawling over the icy road when suddenly a massive tree, toppled by the weight of snow, blocked his path. He slammed on the brakes, sliding slightly before coming to a stop, and cursed under his breath. The storm was relentless, but he knew he couldn't turn back. Seeing the mansion ahead, its lights flickering faintly through the swirling snow, he decided to seek help, hoping someone inside could guide him or at least call for assistance. Daniel trudged through knee-deep snow, the wind biting his face and freezing his fingers despite his gloves. Each step was a struggle, but determination kept him moving. He reached the front door and knocked, his gloved hand pounding against the heavy wood. Inside, Elena, already exhausted and in intense pain, heard the sound. Her heart jumped violently as fear surged through her. For a terrifying moment, she imagined burglars or intruders taking advantage of the storm. Her voice trembled as she screamed warnings through the house, but Daniel's calm, concerned shout answered her instead. When Daniel stepped inside, his eyes immediately took in the scene, a heavily pregnant woman, pale, shivering, and clearly in the midst of labor. Without hesitation, he rushed to her side, speaking in a steady, soothing tone. "You're going to be okay. I'll get you to the hospital," he said firmly, his hands gentle yet confident as he helped her to her feet. Elena's body shook from both fear and pain, but Daniel's presence offered a sliver of reassurance. He lifted her carefully into his arms, wrapping her in his coat, and promised again, "I've got you. You're not alone anymore. We're going to the hospital, and I won't let anything happen to you or your baby." In that instant, she felt a fragile but vital hope spark within her, the first in hours. Daniel's heavy boots sank into the snow with every step as he carried Elena through the storm toward his snowplow truck. The wind lashed at their faces, icy needles stinging any exposed skin, while snow whipped in unpredictable gusts that threatened to throw them off balance. He wrapped his thick jacket tightly around her, pulling her close to shield her from the freezing air. His arms were steady and strong, a lifeline against the chaos of the storm, while his voice remained calm and reassuring. "You're doing so well. Just hold on," he whispered, rubbing her back gently to ease the tension. Elena clung to him, every contraction causing tears to blur her vision and every shiver reminding her how vulnerable she truly was. The snowplow waited, lights cutting weakly through the blizzard, and Daniel carefully lifted her into the cab. He helped her settle against the seat, ensuring she was secure before climbing in himself. The engine roared to life, its vibrations a small comfort against the overwhelming cold outside. The roads were treacherous, slick ice patches, fallen branches, and drifting snowbanks made progress slow and perilous. Visibility was almost non-existent, and the storm's fury threatened to push the truck off course at every turn. Yet Daniel's hands remained steady on the wheel, his jaw tight with concentration, refusing to let fear dictate their path. Elena squeezed his hand tightly with each wave of pain, her body trembling as tears streaked her snow-dusted face. "Is the baby going to be okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine and the howling wind. Daniel met her eyes, his expression firm but kind. Yes, your baby's going to be fine. Just stay with me, don't give up," he urged. His voice was an anchor, a steady rhythm in the chaos. Hour after hour, mile after mile, he drove with fierce determination, every decision focused on one goal: keeping Elena and her unborn child alive through the storm's relentless fury. Sarah stared at her phone, frozen, as she watched the live stream of Camilla's extravagant party. Her stomach twisted when she saw Marcus laughing, drink in hand, twirling Camilla on the dance floor while his wife, Elena, should have been resting at home in the middle of a raging snowstorm. Panic surged through her veins. She quickly dialed Elena's father, her voice shaking as she tried to explain the situation. "Dad, you need to do something. Marcus is at some party, and Elena, she's in labor." "The storm, she's alone," Sarah stammered. There was silence for a moment before she heard the sharp, furious intake of breath on the other end. Elena's father didn't waste a second, his protective instincts ignited into full force, and he grabbed his coat and keys, shouting at anyone nearby to move aside. He was going to the hospital immediately, regardless of the blizzard outside. Meanwhile, back at the party, Marcus finally glanced at his phone. 25 missed calls. 30. 40. He frowned slightly but waved it off, assuming it was someone being dramatic or a work-related nuisance. Camilla leaned over, whispering flirtatiously, urging him to ignore the interruptions. But then Marcus's phone rang again, and it was Elena's father. The moment Marcus answered, the furious yelling on the other end pierced through the party chatter. Elena's father's voice was raw with anger and fear. "You left her. She's in labor. She's fighting for her life in a snowstorm, and you chose to be here." Marcus's confident facade faltered. Panic flashed in his eyes. Guests nearby had begun to notice his sudden shift in demeanor. Whispers spread quickly, their curiosity piqued by the tense conversation Marcus was trying to mask. Some guests glanced at him with suspicion, some with disapproval. Camilla gripped his arm, her face pale, and muttered nervously, urging him to stay put, worried the scandal could ruin them both. But the damage was already happening, the narrative had begun to form in the minds of the partygoers. Marcus, the golden-hearted millionaire in public perception, was showing a side none of them had expected: selfish, cold, and dangerously absent when it mattered most. Daniel burst through the hospital doors, his coat soaked and frozen from the storm, carrying Elena carefully in his arms. The reception staff gasped at the sight of her, immediately summoning a team of doctors and nurses. Elena's body was trembling uncontrollably, her face pale and slick with sweat, and it was clear to everyone present that she had been through a grueling ordeal. Daniel's voice, hoarse from shouting over the wind and snow, gave her name and explained the dire situation. Without hesitation, the medical team sprang into action, wheeling a gurney toward him as he gently lowered Elena onto it. Inside the emergency room, the doctors assessed her condition with rapid efficiency. She was severely dehydrated, her pulse erratic, and her contractions had left her dangerously exhausted. Blood pressure readings flickered on the monitor, warning of possible complications if the delivery wasn't managed immediately. Nurses moved quickly, setting up 4 lines, oxygen, and fetal monitors while instructing Elena to breathe deeply through the contractions. Daniel stayed close by, standing tensely near her bed, clutching her hand and whispering encouraging words, but he was careful to give the medical staff room to work. Hours passed like minutes as Elena fought through the agonizing waves of labor, her body straining under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Finally, with one last, immense push, a baby girl emerged into the world, wailing with life. Relief washed over everyone, but Elena, completely drained from the intensity of the labor and the long night of fear and stress, lost consciousness immediately. Panic surged briefly as doctors checked her vitals, stabilizing her with fluids and oxygen. Daniel's hands tightened around hers as he whispered assurances, watching as the medical team worked tirelessly. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, Elena's condition stabilized. She remained unconscious, pale and fragile, yet alive, with her newborn daughter resting safely in the care of the nurses. The storm outside may have raged on, but inside the hospital, a fragile, miraculous calm settled around the mother and child, a moment of fragile hope amid the chaos. Marcus finally arrived at the hospital hours later, his expensive coat dusted with snow, his face a mixture of panic and irritation. He stormed through the sliding doors, striding toward the reception desk, demanding to see Elena immediately. His voice was sharp, commanding, betraying both anger and fear, but it only drew the attention of staff and visitors alike. Elena's father, who had been pacing anxiously near the waiting area, turned at the sound of Marcus's voice. Rage instantly overtook him. Without hesitation, he lunged at Marcus, gripping his collar and shaking him fiercely. "Do you even know what you've done? You left her alone in a snowstorm, in labor. You could have killed both of them," he yelled, his face red with fury. The nurses quickly intervened, physically blocking Marcus from approaching Elena's room. His protests grew louder, demanding to be allowed in, but the staff refused, citing both hospital policy and the danger of his aggressive behavior. Every attempt to push past them only reinforced their resolve. Marcus's anger began to boil into desperation. At the same time, his phone buzzed relentlessly. Screenshots from Camilla's party, clips of him dancing and laughing while Elena struggled alone, and leaked messages exposing his affair circulated rapidly on social media. Within minutes, the online world erupted with condemnation. Marcus's business partners, who had long admired his public image, called off meetings, distanced themselves, and quietly cut ties. Sponsors withdrew offers, media outlets published damning headlines, and every friend or acquaintance who had previously praised him began questioning his character. The perfect, untouchable millionaire persona he had spent years cultivating crumbled in a single night. He stood in the hospital lobby, snow still clinging to his coat, watching helplessly as his empire of reputation, respect, and influence disintegrated. The combination of Elena's father's righteous fury and the viral exposure of his betrayal left Marcus stunned, powerless, and fully exposed for the selfish, reckless man he had shown himself to be. Elena's eyes fluttered open, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room cutting through the fog of exhaustion. Her body ached, every muscle trembling, but the first thing she saw was the tiny, fragile face of her newborn daughter lying in a bassinet beside her. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, cradling her baby close. The weight of relief, fear, and overwhelming love pressed down on her chest. Daniel stood quietly nearby, his hand brushing hers gently, offering support without overstepping. She realized, in that moment, that he had carried her through the storm, literally and figuratively, and had saved both her life and her daughter's. Marcus appeared at the doorway, his expression a mix of panic, shame, and feigned concern. He stepped forward cautiously, voice trembling as he tried to speak. "Elena." She held up a hand, stopping him before he could utter another word. Her tears now flowed freely, but her tone was steady, resolute. "I don't want to hear it," she said quietly, yet with unshakable strength. "You chose someone else over me and our child. I want a divorce, and I want full custody. Nothing you say or do can change that." Marcus's face paled as the weight of her words sank in. The consequences of his selfish actions unfolded rapidly. Investors withdrew support, fearing association with a man whose betrayal had become public. Camilla, who had once seemed untouchable, abandoned him as social media and news outlets shredded his reputation. Doors that had always been open to Marcus slammed shut. Meanwhile, Elena began to build a new life. With her father's unwavering support and the presence of her healthy, precious daughter, she found peace she had never known. Daniel stayed in contact, his quiet, steady support reminding her of kindness in the midst of betrayal. Sitting by the window as snow gently fell outside, Elena realized the storm had not broken her, it had freed her, showing her strength, resilience, and the ability to create a life defined not by her husband's betrayal, but by her courage, love, and newfound independence.